So, here are some insane highlights in history. 1993 Islanders vs Penguins. The Game 7 of the league in the year 1993 saw a high-profile matchup between the New York Islanders pitted against the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Pittsburgh Penguins. The game began on a slow pitch as it remained scoreless through the first 27 minutes, displaying all signs of a tight end-to-end gameplay. The deadlock was broken by Ulf Samuelsson, who advocated the scoring for the Penguins. The Islanders would counter heavily by scoring 3 consecutive goals to assume a 3-1 lead by the middle of the third period. While many assumed that the game was done and dusted, the final 4 minutes of the game would see Pittsburgh claw back into the match with 2 hard-fought goals, daring their opponents in overtime. Despite creating more goal-scoring chances, Pittsburgh would ultimately go on to squander the match as the Islanders managed to come out on top with David Volek's overtime winner at 5:16 into the extra frame. This would seal a thrilling topsy-turvy match. 1993 Kings vs Maple Leafs. The year 1993 saw some of the most amazing hockey league games in history. With several matches being nominated for the Best Hockey Match in History title, many believe that the greatest match ever took place in between the Maple Leafs and Kings in the 7th Game 7 of the Clarence Campbell Conference Finals. The game became famous for becoming a showpiece for Wayne Gretzky of the Kings, as he was the most dominant player on the ice throughout the game. He began the scoring early on to award the Kings a 1-0 lead, and then continued on his scintillation attack to maintain a 3-2 lead midway through the second period. The Los Angeles Kings would continue to lead 4-3 late in the game, as Gretzky completed his hat-trick to ensure that the game was out of reach for his opponents. The final score would be 5-4 in favor of the Kings. 1970 Bruins vs Blues. Game 4 of the 1979 Stanley Cup Final would be remembered for the iconic goal scored by one Bobby Orr, as the match went down in history as being one of the finest ever played. Their previous 3 meetings of the series were dominated by Boston, who were within a Game 4 of capturing the coveted Stanley Cup. St. Louis would, however, give a tough fight, taking a 2-1 and 3-2 lead in the game, only to allow the Bruins to fight back each time to even the score. As the match slipped into overtime, Bobby Orr received a beautiful pass from Derek Sanderson just in front of the net, and the crowd remained stuck in awe as they saw him neatly tucking the disc under Blues goaltender Glenn Hall for a show-stopping game winner. His movements while scoring would be forever etched in history as the greatest photo ever taken of a player flying in the air for a goal. 1987 Islanders vs Capitals. The Game 7 of the 1987 edition would be renowned as one of the longest and best games in the NHL playoffs history. The game, played between the Islanders and Capitals, endured 4 overtime, with the Washington Capitals leading 2-1 after the first 2 periods of play. A late goal in the final third by Brian Trottier plunged the game into overtime. The tie could not be broken despite another full 3 periods of play, as the score remained 2-2 as if etched in stone. At 8:47 into the 4th overtime, the game would finally be sorted out by Pat LaFontaine, scoring his 4th goal of the series to eliminate the Capitals from the playoffs. The Islanders goalkeeper Kelly Hrudey would make his mark by making 73 saves in their match to victory. 1986 Blues vs Flames. The Game 6 of the 1986 Clarence Campbell Conference Finals was extremely important for the St. Louis Blues, as they required a win to stay in the competition. The game would go on to feature one of the greatest playoff comebacks in the league's history. The Flames began red-hot, scoring 4 goals in the first period, almost putting the game beyond reach for their opponents as they were left chasing shadows. With the Calgary up 5-2 with less than 13 minutes remaining on the clock, for most of the people following the match, it seemed as if the series was over, but the Blues refused to accept the status quo. Their resilience would see them scoring 3 unanswered goals, which included 2 showstoppers by Craig Paslowski in the final 5 minutes, as the Blues roared back into play. St. Louis would eventually complete their miraculous fairy tale in overtime with Doug Wickenheiser's 2nd goal of the game, winning the match with a 6-5 margin. 2009 Capitals vs Penguins. Even though it wasn't a special game in terms of the series culmination, the 2009 second game between the Capitals and Penguins was simply too remarkable to forget. The game became a killing spree for Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin as they piled up goals for their respective teams. David Steckel's lone goal scored for the Capitals was the only goal to not have a Crosby or Ovechkin named etched on it, as all their remaining 6 goals were scored by either of the 2 players in the 7-goal thriller. The game was tied at 2 apiece in the 3rd period, as Ovechkin scored his second and third goals of the game to guarantee the Capitals a 4-2 lead. Crosby would complete his hat trick, but his sheer abilities wouldn't prove to be enough for the Penguins, as the Washington Capitals would hold on for a 4-3 victory in the end. 2013 Bruins vs Maple Leafs. The seventh game of the 2013 encounter between the Maple Leafs and the Bruins would be known forever in hockey history for its utter madness towards the end. The Maples had them under their control with 7 goals before being slammed right into the fighting spirit of their opponents. The game began with too early in the third period as Toronto found themselves leading 4-1 with 14 minutes separating them from the second round. Things changed quickly with Boston firing one down with 11 minutes left to make the scoreline 4-2. Till the final minute and a half, the Toronto Fortress would hold strong before the Bruins made their comebacks with 2 goals in a span of 31 seconds to even the score at 4 apiece. The Bruins would complete their miraculous comeback with Patrice Bergeron netting a little past 6 minutes into overtime as they handed Toronto one of their worst and the most painful losses in the franchise history while thrilling the fans with one of the most amazing NHL playoff games. 2014 Kings vs Blackhawks. Game 7 of the 2014 Western Conference Finals between the Kings and Blackhawks would provide a thrilling slugfest for the fans and would go down in history as one of the greatest NHL postseason games. Chicago would score a brace to secure a 2-0 lead early on in the game, only for the Kings to respond back with 2 of their own to tie the game. The Blackhawks would then grab the lead back twice, back at 3-2 and 4-3, but Marian Gaborik of the Kings would find the back of the net when it needed the most in the third to tie the game at 4 apiece. The game ended in a stalemate as the fans watched the slugfest with utter awe. 1982 Kings vs Oilers. Famous as the Miracle on Manchester, the Game 3 of the 1982 Smith Division semifinals featuring the Kings and Oilers on opposing camps would be known as one of the greatest comebacks in NHL history. Edmonton of the Oilers would come out of the dressing room firing at cylinders, scoring 2 goals in the first period, followed by a hat trick in the second to grab a huge and almost unsurpassable lead of 5-0 after the culmination of the second. The third session would start with a massive momentum shift in favor of the Kings as they threw everything they could at the Grand Fur. Their sheer tenacity and resilience stunned the Oilers as they conceded 5 goals within the period, which included a thrilling game-tying goal squeezed in with 5 seconds remaining on the clock. Overtime would see the Los Angeles Kings complete their improbable comeback with Darrell Evans scoring the game winner with 2:35 into the extra frame. The match would end 6-5 in favor of the Kings amid joyous scenes from the crowd. So, did you feel the insanity and the craze behind the NHL matches as well? Please view and give your thoughts in the comment section.